Vance is so the boy in the sixth form common room. He's like kind of hanging around in a slightly smelly-looking leather jacket, kind of muttering darkly.
But as ever, I start the show with 1 hour on 7 days. And here to look back on the week's news are TV queen and novelist Lorraine Kelly. Hello, Lorraine.
Hello, Hugo.
How have you been?
I've been good, thanks. The weather's rubbish, though, isn't it? It's really crap, but I've been fine.
Today is a bit grim. They're letting us down in this sort of epic heat wave we've been having. I think that's a bit rough. Alongside the author and Times columnist Caitlin Moran. Hello, Caitlin.
I'm happy about the weather. As a keen gardener, this is going to save me 2 hours with a hose tonight. So I'm always on the bright side.
That's true.
It is filling up the water butt. I'm not going to lie. You know.
Yeah. But my butt is huge, so I can take any amount of rain.
It's been minutes. We're minutes into the show, and already this is what we get. Dear me. Anyway, let's crack on. There's a lot to cover. I want to start with, we learnt this week from a new book about the Queen by the biographer and satirist Craig Brown, who will in fact be on this show at this very time next week, that this is Queen Elizabeth II, that when she met Donald Trump, when he was over in Britain on his various visits, she found him very rude because he kept peering over her shoulder as if looking for somebody better to talk to. Lorraine, this is a huge surprise.
Well, it's a massive surprise, isn't it? What a shock. How dare you? I mean, just when you thought you couldn't loathe them enough. Imagine looking over your shoulder to see if there's somebody better than the Queen. There's nobody better than the Queen. Well, the Queen is like, there wasn't, was there? I mean, if you're in a room with the Queen, you don't be looking over your shoulder looking for somebody more interesting, because there isn't anybody more interesting than the Queen, frankly. Well, it's bonkers.
Not least because he was in Buckingham Palace. Who's he going to see? Kermit the Frog? I mean, it's, if he was at the Oscars, maybe. I don't know.
No, even then, the Queen was the biggest superstar in the world, probably because we didn't really know anything about her and we just projected, didn't we? We just sort of, sorry, my dog's annoying me, so I do apologise. She's been a monkey. And as you can see, I'm playing with her sausages. Ruby, we're trying to be serious here. I'm trying to be serious. Do you mind? I'm talking to Hugo Rifkind and Caitlin Moran, for Christ's sake.
I do wish listeners could see what I can see on the Zoom screen right now, which is literally Lorraine Kelly wrestling with the dog and sausages.
It's quite Punch and Judy, isn't it?
It's wonderful. Yeah. Caitlin, look, the rudeness of Donald Trump. I'm not going to claim it's surprising. Do you think we can extrapolate from rude behaviour in a social situation, whether it's with the Queen or not, to character generally?
Well, first of all, obviously, Donald Trump has a problem with women. So I suspect that even though it was the Queen, as Lorraine points out, the Queen is the top. Socially, there's no one better to talk to in a room, in a palace, or in the world. That's it. You've topped out when you've got the Queen. So I suspect that he just found it quite difficult to talk to women and was maybe looking around for a more sympathetic male character that he thought he would be able to get on with. So within Buckingham Palace, you'd be thinking he's going, where is Prince Andrew? That is someone I could vibe
That's
with.
literally who he's looking out for.
We could go off and have adventures together. That's the kind of thing that I would like to be doing right now. But rudeness in a social situation. I mean, the key is always, there are several people I've decided not to work with after going out to dinner with them and seeing how rude they are to waiters, for instance.
Right, yeah.
Which is obviously at the opposite end of the spectrum.
I'm sure Trump would never be rude to a waiter. I cannot imagine such a thing.
You would just have to get up and leave, wouldn't you? Can you imagine what he would be like?
Okay, Lorraine, to be Team Trump here for a moment, as I so often am. In his defence, perhaps one thing: the man's well over 6 foot tall. The Queen was somewhere around 5 foot. Sort of couldn't help peering over her shoulder, I guess, unless he's looking down. And secondly, look, wonderful woman, wonderful for our country. We all love her and loved her and so on. Perhaps her chat wasn't great. After she'd said, "Have you come far?" What's next?
Have you come far? What do you do?
Yes.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, if you get a chance to actually meet the Queen, it doesn't matter what she's saying. She could be saying anything. She could be, she could be just lifting her groceries. You don't really care. But Caitlин's so right about the whole women thing. Do you remember when he took Theresa May's hand?
Yes.
It was the weirdest, maddest thing. And she said, I interviewed her after that, and she said she just really didn't know what to do, because what do you do in that situation? I mean, I suppose you do a Melania and just
shake
pull
it
your
off.
hand away. Shake it off. But utterly bizarre. I just don't get it. I really don't get it at all. But it does not surprised me, and it says everything about the man.
Also,
everything about the man.
it's also rich for Donald Trump to, if you're putting forward the theory he might have been bored by the Queen, to for you to be saying maybe the Queen had dry bands. Donald Trump's conversational style is absolutely bonkers.
But they are direct opposites.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say they would be a nightmare first-hour panel on this show, Donald Trump and the late Queen. Yes. I'm just not seeing the chemistry.
It won't. It's not a vibe, is it?
You feel very much caught between them. Let's look. Sticking in America, let's move on a bit. We've heard a lot this week about the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. So very different from our own party conferences here. So much more whooping. But there's been this sort of huge, joyful celebration of the arrival of Kamala Harris as the presidential candidate, and the Obamas were back. Barack Obama he'd be a great president, wouldn't he? I kept thinking that watching him speak. Caitlin, did you see him speak?
Michelle
What did you think of it all?
would be a great president.
Well, she's next.
Yes.
She's next, perhaps.
I did. I put my back out. This is my rock and roll lifestyle. I put my back out moving a lot of gravel in the garden this week. And in order to comfort myself, I watched nearly all the speeches from the Democratic Convention. I mean, the Obamas are rock stars. I was interested in the showbiz and the organisation of the whole thing. So since it was announced that she was probably going to be running for president, Kamala Harris raised over £300 million.
Yeah.
And I was watching an interview with someone who was explaining what that had been spent on. First of all, you could see a lot of what had been spent on because there was a lot of room accessories, like many balloons, and the phasing in and out of different placards. Like the coordination on that was incredible. I don't know where else you'd be able to use that skill, but kind of like whoever was on stage, they would have placards with their name on it.
Oh, right.
And as soon as they went off stage, it would be new ones and kind of cut out to people's faces. Like it was the coordinate. It was like the synchronized swimming in the Olympics, but with placards.
Very few ironic placards that you get in a British equivalent.
Right? Yeah. No, it's not like Glastonbury where you've got like a flag with "I love sausages" over Barack Obama's face. Like they were drilled on that thing. And also, I noticed as well because they were talking about how much money they'd spent on like the best script writers, and that all the speeches were so incredible. But the thing I noticed, the thing I picked up on, and I would have been writing about if I was writing about it, is that one of the big themes was everyone at some point talked about their mother.
Right.
And I wondered if that was deliberately done because there is still a lot of misogyny in America, and a lot of what people have talked about, one of the biggest hurdles that Kamala Harris will face is deeply ingrained misogyny in the country, and the fact that people don't believe that you could have a woman as president. And I wondered if that was, and I think it was, a deliberate thing that every single person there, male or female, talked about their mothers, because however misogynist a man is out there, he still loves his mum. And if you're reminding people constantly about these strong mums, these good mums, these mums that got things done, these mums that run households.
It just makes them nicer.
Suddenly you're just like, oh yeah, my mum was a capable person. Like if she could run the household that I was brought up in, maybe she could run the White House.
Wow.
So I think that was a very deliberate and very smart tactic.
You should be a political strategist in the United States. This is your next career. Lorraine, the hugeness of it all, the kind of the all singing, all dancing, all whooping, kind of flashing lights. How do you feel about that as a Brit? Is there a bit of you that just sort of feels a bit snooty? Because I do.
I don't think it's snooty. I just think I'm uncomfortable with that. You know, I quite like my politicians to, well, mind you, Trump suits don't fit, but I quite like my politicians to actually, especially just now, to be a bit dull. What I find fascinating, and Caitlin's absolutely right about the mother thing, because, you know, we've had all this nonsense about cat ladies, you know, talking about single cat ladies that don't have children, and how, you know, they're having a real pop at Kamala. I find that really, really deeply offensive, obviously. But what I find really interesting is the way that she's been repackaged, because up until now, they've kind of kept her a wee bit hidden. It was almost as if they were a wee bit embarrassed about her. And anytime she said anything, you were kind of, you know, cringing a little bit. Obviously, you know, as Caitlin says, they've got the best speechwriters, and all she has to do is deliver it. And I thought she delivered it okay, but totally outshone by Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
That was an incredible speech. I mean, it was amazing. And you just suddenly looked at her and thought, please, can you not do it? I don't know that she will, though. I don't know that she will. I think she's probably having a really good life right now. And why would you? Yeah, why would you want that job in a way?
She's probably like, I don't want to move back there, and they're still quite young, the Obamas.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
they looked young, didn't they? They looked full of energy. I mean, obviously he's got a lot grayer, but he still looks really good.
He's only 63. You know, he's 15 younger than Trump still, and that's when he's been out of office for 8 years. What did you both think of Lorraine? You first. What do you think of Tim Walz? He's the the Veep candidate. I'm still completely in love with Helen Lewis's description of him, the journalist Helen Lewis, of looking like a shopping mall Santa who's just taken off his beard, which I think is just amazing. But he seems to represent this sort of daddish American masculinity that we haven't really seen for a while. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I think he's getting shown up though, because I think before that I was very intrigued by him. Obviously, having read his book, and then movie made of that. There was all that sort of almost glamour around him.
Oh no! Wait,
the subject matter was...
wait! You're talking about JD Vance.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm getting my strange men mixed up.
Yeah, because Lorraine, you almost certainly love Tim Walz. I would put money on you loving Tim Walz.
Yeah, I could see you loving Tim Walz.
I absolutely do. He's adorable. He's adorable. I mean, when you kind of dig into him a wee bit, he's not that adorable, but he comes across really, really well. He does come across really well. Oh no, the other one is just ghastly.
JD Vance is an exciting figure in a bad way, I think.
I know.
Quite right. Yeah.
Well, he's really weird. I'm so sorry. I'm getting my American politicians mixed up. It's this silly dog and his sausages that's getting I've got one eye on him and one eye on you guys. No, I really like him. He is good. I think he's a good lad. I think he's obviously she had to pick a white sort of slightly older man that people can relate to, because I don't know what you think, Caitlin, but is America ready for a woman? Is America ready for a woman of colour? Is America ready for all of that? Probably half of it is. But how do you get the other half on side? This is the thing when it's so divided.
Well, again, that was another part of that $300 million worth of script writing, because when she was saying America's story is extraordinary, like there are things that happen in America that can only happen here. Yeah. She was constantly kind of, in a very brilliant and subtle way, going, this is a country where we constantly change things and we set standards, and like kind of like everyone's story is weird, and like it's no weirder that a woman will become a president in the White House than it is to put a man on the moon. Like kind of like that. These are the kind of parallels that she was drawing. I love Tim Walz, obviously. I'm very interested as well, because I think for the last sort of 5 or 6 years there's been many conversations about toxic masculinity and how you sort of like come up against people like Andrew Tate, and just how popular that kind of toxic masculinity
which Vance
has been.
sort of willfully embodies.
Well, Vance is so the boy in the sixth form common room. He's like kind of hanging around in a slightly smelly looking leather jacket, kind of muttering darkly. Like he is so guy.
Hey man, there's nothing wrong with that kid, all right?
You were the nice one. He's the evil one. And he's the guy that would play his guitar at you. He's the guy that probably has written poetry and has made women listen to it at some point. He is the guy that you know, if you're a mom, you pray to God your kids don't come home with them, your girls.
Oh, but can you imagine?
Right?
Can you imagine?
Oh my God. Away.
But didn't you love the son? Waltz's son? That was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, what a lovely, lovely young man, and to see him doing that and the emotion and everything. And
his neurodiverse son, who was sort of leaping up, shouting, "That's my dad!" while he spoke. It was like
I know,
real movie
I absolutely loved that.
But I love how successfully Tim Walz is presenting this new, without kind of like deliberately going, there are different ways to be a man. He's just going, these older things. Let's remember these things that we used to think about that were great about men. You're just reliable. You're the guy that's always got a can of WD-40. There was all those tweets going around when he was nominated for VP, like he'll be the guy. It was the first day in the White House. He'll be going around and squirting WD-40 and all the squeaky hinges in the White House.
Putting up shelves.
Well, as Jon Stewart said about Obama himself, I can't wait to see how he breaks our hearts. I hope it's financial. A bunch of people have been in touch this morning. Lindy says, we were talking about Donald Trump and meeting the Queen. She says, perhaps he was looking around the room as who was looking at him talking with the Queen. None of us knew what he was thinking. Thank you, Lindy. And someone else, no name on this one, says, is it not rather hypocritical to say the crazy cat lady comment was deeply offensive, but then laugh about the weirdo kid JD Vance? Why is his awkwardness and stereotype fair game, but wine mum Kamala's isn't? Fair point, but yes. And also, 2 texts from the same number, the first of which says, ask Caitlin how her back is now, and the second of which says, this text is from Caitlin. Caitlin, how's your back?
Oh, thank you for asking, Hugo.
Well, you know, it just came to me.
It is a lot better. It was in spasm for the first 3 days, but it seems to have evened out now. But thank you for your concern.
Well, you know, just keen to respond to what listeners are thinking.
It's important.
Yes. Let's crack on. Okay. A story in the Times this week. They reported on a study by Zoopla, the service for snooping on the interior decor of your friends' new houses, that of 62% of first-time buyers had received help from family to buy, normally from the bank of mum and dad. But sons typically get a lot more than daughters, around a fifth more on average, which works out as about £13,000 more. Why are parents giving more money to their sons to buy houses than they are to their daughters? Lorraine, is it because parents are nicer to sons, or is it because sons need more help because they're useless?
I'm not sure. I mean, for goodness sake, if you're a parent in that situation and you can afford to help your kids, then good for you. Maybe it's because I mean, certainly I've got friends who've almost got funds for their kids. Not that much, but they've set aside certain amounts of sums for their children, and the daughters, it's to pay for the wedding.
Yeah.
So it might be that. I don't know. It might be the fact that they think, oh well, they spent fortunes on this day that everybody's very stressed about, and I would worry that nobody has a good time. And then maybe they give the sons a wee bit more to set them up if they can afford it. And it has become a thing, hasn't it? Especially in the south of England, especially in London, that young people just can't get on the property ladder, so they've got to rely on their mums and dads, or they've got to stay. And maybe it's because parents would rather their daughters stayed with them.
That's
I don't
interesting.
know. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It feels deeply, I don't know, deeply patriarchal that the daughters get the money for the wedding and the sons get the money, the money for the house.
I know.
I mean, we
it's
are
old-fashioned, right?
Totally, but we are now in this sort of this new sort of economic reality whereby I think people who are 20 years younger than me, if they are going to buy a house, it is going to be with family money. The division is not necessarily between people with high incomes and low incomes. It's between people with high inheritances and no inheritance, really, and that's it. Caitlin, the gender divide here, how would you make sense of that?
Well, when you said, are they giving boys more money? Is it because A, they're more useless, or B, because they're just nicer to them? Both of those things. People are nicer to boys, I think, because they are a bit more helpless.
Right.
Like, girls are just a bit more wily. Like, kind of like all the teenage girls.
Not wily enough to get an extra 13 grand out of their parents, it seems.
Well, I think it's presumed by parents that the girls will just crack on and solve the problem much quicker than boys. Like, kind of girls are better at being able to find flatmates to share spaces with. They're better at, they've usually got bigger social circles. They'll know more people they can move in with, so they need less help. However, I thought the big clue to why there might be a disparity in the money was in one sentence in this report where it says, half of those who received assistance said that parents wanted to say in the type of home they bought and how it was decorated. Okay, I think girls are not asking for financial help from their mothers and fathers.
Because they don't have to explain their curtains.
They do not want to have anybody fiddling with their decorating skills. Like, boys would be like, fine, you buy the house, you decorate how you want, Mom. Girls are like, I have had a Pinterest board on what my kitchen worktops are going to look like since I was 13. My girls, and also from the games that my girls used to play, there are so many games that you used to play on like Nintendo and stuff, where like Sims, they spend all their time on Sims decorating their houses. Boys are not playing games where they're decorating houses from the age of 12. They're just going and turning into like orcs from Feldham and killing them.
That's interesting because, I mean, on computer games terms, boys will plan an entire civilization and have wars to defend it. Yes. But that you're right, they won't be big on the interior decor of the various parts of that civilization.
No, and my girls took those houses very seriously. Like, kind of like, I know the interior decor of every single house that they built since the age of 12. So it's just a difference in priorities, isn't it? And I think your mum or dad helping you with decorating is probably the key factor in that.
I think you've solved this one. Lorraine, the big story here about the fact that there is a whole generation where basically sort of home ownership is out of reach unless parents help. That seems like a sort of huge emerging social problem that no one's really talking about.
No, it's true. And it's actually really, really worrying because I remember that sense of real satisfaction when I bought my first tiny, tiny flat in Glasgow and got this massive mortgage and celebrating, but I couldn't afford, you're talking about decorating your house, I couldn't afford very much at all. I remember getting a sofa from the Saturday Snips on the back of the Evening Times for £5. I mean, it was a long time ago, but that's kind of what you did, wasn't it? That's not what you did. I think young women are probably better at saving up as well. I think that's maybe a thing. And maybe, I mean, it shouldn't be. Obviously, your sons should get the same as your daughters, but it's going to be a massive, massive problem, especially as we don't have enough social housing. We just don't. It's really difficult to rent. We all know how hard it is.
Lorraine, I can't believe your privilege that you spent £5 on a sofa. I got my first sofa out of a skip. So...
Well... I had gravel. It's gravel for breakfast and lived in a home. No, but it's
okay.
True, but actually, it's you're right, Hugo. It's a massive, massive problem, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, totally. Well, a couple of people have been in touch. Stephen says my cousin was offered a choice for a wedding. The wedding paid for or a house. She took the wedding. which is mad. Whereas Ross says, I'm getting married at 2 p.m. today. If there's any money going around, I'll have some of it. Best of luck, Ross. Hope you have a wonderful wedding. That's Ross in Sussex. All the best to him. Let's move on. Spot of politics of a sort. Robert Genrich roared in the Conservative leadership contest this week. He's one of the leading not Kemi Badenoch candidates, with the announcement that he had lost 4 stone thanks to Ozempic, the drug, but he didn't particularly enjoy it. Remember, Boris Johnson previously took Ozempic too to end what he called his cheese and chorizo binges. I feel like I'm not quite fat enough for Ozempic, but I sort of feel a bit like sort of cheated by that, because I could really use losing a couple of stone, although there do seem to be all these stories floating around as well about the way it either makes you go mad or blind, so it might have some downsides. Caitlin, I'll start with you. Does this change the way you think about somebody like Robert Genrich if he's taken drugs in order to get thin and look how he wants? Or should it? Or does it and it shouldn't? Or what?
Well, given that I've read what the side effects of Ozempic are, the way that it changes me thinking about Robert Genrich is knowing that he's probably been on the toilet solidly for several months, because one of the side effects is diarrhea. So in that respect, like kind of knowing that someone is trying at some point in their career to be Prime Minister, and knowing they've had a very dicky tummy for a month.
That's kind of grit and determination, though. That's admirable.
Grit's almost the right word. It's something in determination. I mean, we all have our weaknesses. If there was a jab I could take that would stop me smoking, I would take it like a shot. So like kind of, everybody needs their help with these things. I find philosophically Ozempic very interesting, because there were a lot of these side effects, apart from being banned on the toilet for many months. People have talked about how it stops them also, it stops them wanting to eat, but it's also stopped them wanting to gamble.
Right.
It's stopped them wanting to take drugs.
It might make you stop smoking.
Well, I will give it a go at some point, but I think philosophically it's a deeper thing. Like, it seems to stop you wanting. And I find that quite extraordinary, that like kind of like in a culture particularly where we want so much. If you compare what the average person had in their house in like 1986, I can list every single item we had in our house in 1986. There weren't many things in it. Yeah. Whereas now the big TV shows that you see are ones where they have to get in Stacey Solomon to help them clear out their houses because they're hoarders. The instances of hoarding have gone up. We seem to want far more than we need, to a point where it becomes a problem and we have to go on a TV show to solve that. So the idea that a drug has come along at this point in our culture and has gone, if you overwant, we can flatten that out again and take you back to some base level of maybe just only concentrating on what you need, what you need to eat, what you need
I'm just not sure about the I don't know, the meaning of life without wanting. Does that sound mad? You know what I mean?
That's why I'm against it. That's why, even if it might solve me from smoking, I don't want to take a drug that would flatten out all my want, because I think it's a really important human drive to want things. I don't want to still be lying around going, I'm perfectly satisfied with anything. That sounds like a recipe for chaos. But the philosophy of Ozempic I find really interesting. We only ever talk about it in terms of, has it made your bum smaller? And like kind of like, there's a deeper thing going on here, guys.
Talking about everything from Ozempic to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Alex says, let's put Ozempic in the water supply like fluoride. Thank you, Alex. And meanwhile, no name on this one, unfortunately, says, Hugo, I think it's perfectly safe for you to take Ozempic. If you think Kamala Harris would make a good president, you may be blind and mad already. Which just really cements my policy that I'm quite happy to be abused as long as it's very funny. So well done with that. I'm currently going through the news of the week with Caitlin Moran and Lorraine Kelly. And guys, I wanted the conversation now to turn, as conversations these days inevitably do, to Taylor Swift. These days, she ended her European tour, breaking records of all sorts, including becoming the first person to have played Wembley the most times in a single tour. That doesn't make sense. To becoming the person to have played Wembley the most times in a single tour, which is 8, a record previously held by Michael Jackson. Caitlin, you were there last week.
I was, yes.
Tell us about it.
I was, because I'm an awful media person, I was offered tickets. And
I paid for mine.
I know.
And that's why yours was so much better than mine.
I know, you sent pictures of your view and mine was much, much better.
We were literally behind the stage.
I was literally on stage. It was extraordinary. So I went with my 2 daughters because I wanted to see what I've not understood her. I don't get it. My daughters were too old to get into her. So I didn't get it, and I was like, I want to go there and understand. This is a really important thing. And the next book I'm writing is about the idea of there being a female culture, and I can't think of there be anything more female culture than the way that Swifties respond to Taylor Swift. So I went with my daughters. They're like 2 cool school rock girls, kind of like, we'll go and see what it's like. As soon as she came on stage, turns out they know every single word to every single song. And I was like, how do you know all the words? They were like, well, they're just there, aren't they?
My girls knew all the words to everything for 3.5 hours.
Did you know all the words?
I knew a surprising number of the words. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, we've heard a lot. Yeah, Lorraine, have you been to see Taylor Swift? Will you go to see Taylor Swift if she ever comes back?
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm a bit like Caitlin. I don't really get it, but obviously it's huge. And what I love about it is the kindness. A lot of my team went, my show, a lot of them went, and they came back the next day, whether they went on their own with friends or took their daughters, and they came back the next morning like covered in friendship bracelets and glowing with happiness and joy. And I love that. I love the positivity about it. I love the fact that it's, a young woman who's just got the world in the palm of her hands. I mean, we talk about her so much. It's become kind of the law that every show, and I'm glad you are conforming to that by talking about Taylor Swift, because it has become that. But what I really noticed about it was when they came back, and I don't know how you felt after seeing her, Caitlin. Did you feel full of joy and happiness and light?
I felt full of joy and happiness. Like, I was very hungover as well because there was many children there, so there was no queue for the Aperol Spritz bar at all.
The bars were. For probably every gig I've ever been to, the bar was very easy to access.
No queue, and Ronaldo on the Aperol Spritz bar was cutting us bog-off deals by the end because he had to shift those jugs. So I was quite tipsy, but I was ecstatic. It had been amazing, but I was also pleased because I thought I'd finally, in my drunkenness, worked out what it is.
Yeah.
So if you look at someone like Madonna, if you became a Madonna fan, Madonna's like a tough cookie with a difficult background, and the songs are about being kind of sassy and sexual and making your way in the world. Lana Del Rey is all about kind of tragedy and stuff. You think about all the big female icons that have gone before. In order to be her fan, you have to kind of grow up and either it taps into a part of you that is screwed up, and that's why you're relating to it, or you start acting a bit more like you're screwed up. I got into terrible trouble after watching the Justify My Love video by Madonna when I was 14. That led to all kinds of hoo-has and shenanigans. Yep. Whereas Taylor is the first star that's come along that is comfortable in her ordinariness. Like, kind of like, things have happened to her that are bad, but the image isn't, this is a dark, screwed up thing, and we're all going to pretend to be a bit more dark and screwed up than we are while we're watching it. She's like, no, I am good and I am wholesome and I am kind. Yeah. And that's why when you get to the stuff from around the Reputations era, where she was obviously in her feud with Kim and Kanye and stuff, where she's singing Bad Blood, like, the surprise still on her face that she had to kind of tool up and become vengeful and spiteful. And I think that really appears, because most girls are good girls without particularly dramatic or awful lives. And to finally have an idol who's just going, you don't have to pretend to be kind of like, on a one-way trip in a motor car down a speeding highway to death. Like, we can just sing about your normal lives, your cruel summer, your good friends, your bad friends, these boys you fancied who screwed you over. And I think just that normality is finally, I think that's a really big stage in women's lives and female culture as a whole.
I think you're dead right, and that's also kind of what I actually don't like about her, that only crystallised for me during this gig, much as I enjoyed it, which is I do like my music to be a bit dirtier, a bit edgier. I do like to feel that I'm watching something that not everybody would like, and when it feels that universal, I start to feel quite basic.
Oh, well, it didn't, like, I enjoyed watching it. It didn't hit me in the guts in the way that I'd know watching PJ Harvey or Courtney Love would. But also there was an amazing thing, given that I'd read all the stats on the tour before, finding out that she earns £11 million per gig. For quite a lot of it, I was just watching her going, this is someone earning £11 million in front of me. That's quite amazing as well.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed for your next book tour, Caitlin. Look, sticking on music, Lorraine, there's been a lot of debate this week about whether or not teens are safe at music festivals. I should say there's some horrific stories coming out of Germany this morning about stuff that happened at a festival there.
Hellish.
That's not particularly what I wanted to talk about, but obviously we'll be watching that, and that story will be unfolding across Times Radio the rest of the day. It's also Reading and Leeds this weekend, and although not strictly a music festival, the Notting Hill Carnival, which the weather is going to make all three of those particularly exciting. But the worries of parents are more to do with drink, drugs, fighting, etc. And yet these aren't little kids we're talking about. These are generally people who are over 16. Lorraine, what do you think about sort of, parents being worried about their kids going to music festivals? Is it very sort of modern and neurotic, or does it make sense?
No, I think that's always happened, hasn't it? I mean, even when I used to go to the Apollo in Glasgow to see like David Bowie and things like that back in the 70s. In fact, the first gig I went to was Sweet. Do you remember them?
Who?
The glam rock band.
The Sweet, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah,
of course. And I went there, and I do remember my mum sort of being really like a cat on a hot tin roof. She was all worried about me going, getting the bus into Glasgow and going and seeing this very naughty band who are not naughty at all. And I worried about my daughter going to Tea in the Park and the festivals in Inverness and everything. I think, but it's kind of like a rite of passage. I personally have never been to a proper big giant festival. I went to see Runrig at Loch Lomond, and that was amazing. But I've never been to Glastonbury, and to be honest, you couldn't pay me to go. I would rather. I've got to the stage in my life. I would rather sit at home with a drink, listening to it. Listening to people that I love are watching it on the telly, which is a bit sad, really. But there you go. I think you kind of. I think you've sort of got to let your kids go. I think what really worries me now is when we used to go out, your pals, you stuck with your pals. I mean, do you remember when Tony Blair's wee boy was left face down in Leicester Square?
Sure, yeah.
And his pals left him. And that's the thing. I think I would, as a parent, I would feel much, much better that they're all going in a gang together. But what seems to be happening, and again, I don't know, but from what I've read, is that gangs go out, and especially boys, they sort of encourage each other to take different drugs, and it's like a kind of, it's like you're almost shamed if you say you don't want to do it. You're kind of shamed, and it's embarrassing. And I think that's really, really worrying. That would worry me, and I think I would worry more about myself if I had a boy. I'd worry more about my boy than my daughter, weirdly. Because I think girls tend, if they're not at Taylor Swift, because I don't imagine loads of boys go, that if they're not at Taylor Swift, the girls look after each other. That's what I'm saying. I think girls look after each other.
We've come full circle. That's why you'd have to give him more money to buy a house so he doesn't go to music festivals. Caitlin, you must remember your first time at a music festival. You must have been the troublesome teen at a music festival.
Well, as Lorraine
in fact,
says,
you know what? I've seen you like this. You are still the troublesome teen at a music festival.
Thank you so much. I like to keep it fresh. I mean, as Lorraine says, gigs have always been a bit risky. Like, it is that rite of passage thing. Like, the first gig I ever went to, I got permanent ear damage from being down the front. Mosh pits were brutal in those days, particularly for girls. Like, you would not go in a mosh pit. Bad stuff could happen. The first festival I went to was Reading when I was 16. Nirvana were headlining. I climbed up on some scaffolding, which I'm sure was a massive security risk.
Wow.
And headbanged so much while still wearing a hat and keeping it on through the gig, I might add, that again, I got permanent neck damage. So festivals have always been a kind of place where, you push yourself. But a lot of it, like, the big festivals that people are worried about are things like Reading and Leeds, where, as my daughters have been to it, you do get gangs of boys doing awful things, going to the toilet all over the place. There was one boy who was surrounded by canisters of laughing gas going, "I'm the NOS king," and opening like suitcases of NOS and handing it around to everybody. As a parent, just be a little bit more informed. If you can take your kids to festivals really early on, because I've always been to festivals. We used to take our kids to festivals, and there were so many different festivals, and just give them, let them have a ramp into it.
Yeah.
You don't want your kids to have never gone to a festival on their own, and suddenly, wham, they're at like Reading or Leeds, which is very much now marketed as the place where you get off your face. Just pick, let your children go to a smaller festival. There's so many still in this country, and just have some like festival awareness and chops rather than letting them go in at the deep end.
Yeah,
and I think boys are at more risk, because as Lorraine says, girls will look after each other, whereas boys are like
boys will do the opposite. Boys will mess each other up.
Well, they've also seen those documentaries about Woodstock and Fire Festival as well, and they're kind of like, yeah, it's going to be like Lord of the Flies, and that's good.
Yeah.
Whereas girls are like, it looks like Lord of the Flies, and that would be bad.
Oh, that's the division of the sexes right there. Spotted geopolitics I wanted to talk about next, or at least local geopolitics. From next summer, you will need a visa or ESTA-style waiver to travel from the UK to the EU. But the rumour is the government is trying to do something about that, which will also enable young Europeans to come and work here, which some regard as a terrible Brexit betrayal. Lorraine, this sort of thing, visas to go to Europe, Europeans needing visas to come here, or at least a waiver so that to waive your visa, this is precisely what we voted for, right? We can't complain.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Absolutely heartbreaking. I still don't understand. I'm trying to get over it, and we're trying to sort of all, try to work this out. But this is awful. It's absolutely awful, and it's yet another layer. All this nonsense about taking back control, and it's all going to be much easier. And here we are. It's going to cost people more money to go on their holidays, and it's also. I mean, I don't know if you've been away just now, but the last time I flew to Spain, the queues were absolutely horrific. We nearly missed our plane, and everybody was going crazy. Just the queues in the passport, the passport queues to get out.
My wife and kids both have German passports, which means when we arrive in the EU, they get to skip on the short queue, and I have to wait behind. Like as the shamed Brit in the long queue. But I mean, Lorraine, this was a sort of integral part of leaving. That you can't leave the EU and expect that everything's going to be the same as it was. And a majority of people did vote for this, so maybe we just kind of need to suck it up.
They didn't know. They didn't know when they voted. They were, as we know, I mean, we've gone over this many times, that people were lied to, people weren't given the facts, the people on the other side should have actually made better arguments and all the rest of it, and that's kind of going. What is encouraging is that maybe they might be able to do something about it, just to kind of get round it a little bit. Because, I'm fed up of going away to Europe and kind of apologising, even just like you feel embarrassed. I went to, recently, the most recent time I've been away was I went to the Scotland game, Scotland against Germany, which was brilliant, Hugo. It was brilliant until the football started. It was amazing. but coming back, it was lovely. Coming back, though, again, we nearly missed our flight because we had all this, and it's this kind of segregation, and you feel like some kind of like Untermenschen, that you're standing in this other queue for ages, and then you have to go up to a different place to get your passport looked at and all the rest of it. And it's just awful, and it's going backwards. So hopefully, we might be able to actually do something about it, because maybe these rules aren't written in stone like we thought they were, and maybe there's a way around this. And if there's a degree of willingness, which I think there probably is on behalf of this government, I hope, that we might be able to sort that out, and we might actually start getting kids back here that want to do some work, and we welcome them. We really do. We welcome them with open arms. We want them over here. These kids in their gap years, they're working over here and, picking fruit in Blairgowrie and all the rest of it. And we need that. We really do. And it's just so much better. We need our kids to have the freedom to go over there as well.
Caitlin, I feel like if I'd said in 2016 during the referendum, this will mean we need an Esther to go to the EU, people would have called it Project Fear, and I'd have been shouted down as a fearmonger. Yeah.
Oh, of course, there was never a list. It was very terms and conditions applied. Like very much people just going, I agree, and not pressing it. You know what? I welcome more paperwork. I welcome more queues. It allows the sour Remainers, of which I am one, to play their favourite game every summer when you go abroad, which is standing in a very long passport queue, really loudly going, well, is this the Brexit you voted for? Other people in the queue that you presumed voted for Brexit. And it's the only relief that Remainers like me have. You just loudly talk about what a shag the whole thing is while you're in the passport queue. And in this way, we relieve our tension.
Yeah, but I bet everyone does that, even if they did vote for it. It's just what you sort of have to...
I feel like I can spot them.
We had Peter's texted in saying Brexit is about more than inconvenient travel. It was not a mistake. I mean, it's true. People who travel and like to take their holidays abroad, this is the main thing they think about. It is more about the whole sort of strategic direction of the country, etc. But I do think, had this been flagged up as an argument while the debate was happening, it would have been shouted down as a lie, and it wasn't a lie. Let's move on and talk about this. A very small story. This, are there aliens? No. That's it. That's the story. Are there aliens? The small news this week of a Pentagon former expert on UFOs saying the American government has recovered non-human material from UFO crash sites. I was extremely excited about this when I read it in the Times, no less. And then I suddenly thought, hang on, maybe just one of these flying things hit a non-human pigeon, and that's what they're talking about. But I don't know. This is a story of a man called Louis Elizondo, he worked for the Pentagon studying UFOs. He's seen a lot of aliens, including glowing green orbs in his own home. Caitlin, you ever seen a glowing green orb in your own home?
First of all, stop saying UFOs. It's UAPs now.
I do apologise. I did not mean to dead name UFOs.
For people
UAPs.
of my beliefs.
Right.
We are very keen on. Well, as a teenager, I was regularly in contact with aliens.
Were you?
When I got my teenage library ticket, the first thing I did was go to the occult section of the library, as most people do. I had all the books about aliens. Seemed to me there was a cover-up. I read about all of them. Rendlesham Forest, all this stuff.
Yep.
I was deeply into this. And around about the time I started reading these books, I started seeing very rapidly moving bright lights from the windows of my house.
Right.
Which over time I began to believe were communicating with me and that I was a chosen person.
Okay, I'm just throwing this out there. Buses.
Well, turned out, so for years I was like, this is aliens, they're waiting for me, I'm a chosen person. And then 20 years later, they revealed that they'd been testing the stealth bombers from RAS Cosford, which you can see from the back of our house.
Yeah.
And I'd actually seen a triangular-shaped, huge aircraft go over me as I was going for a countryside walk, which I drew in my diary at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Which, when they released all the pictures of the stealth bombers, was literally that. So I'm now, although I really enjoyed the years where I thought aliens were in contact with me and that I was one of the chosen ones, have now realised that my alien experience was based in, facts that hadn't been revealed at the time. I also realised as well that when I was deep in my conspiracy theories about aliens, I kept referring to the secret area in Mexico where they store supposedly these aircrafts and alien bodies as Studio 54.
No.
Which obviously it was not. Would have been amazing. Yeah. And also maybe that is what Studio 54 was.
But... There could have been aliens at Studio 54, the nightclub. You never know. Lorraine, I feel if and when aliens do come, obviously they'll be interviewed in the Times Magazine by Caitlin, but they'll also appear on your show, surely.
I would think so, absolutely. I'm so torn about this because I really want it to be true. But then the people who come, usually the people who come and say that they were abducted by aliens are poor wee souls living in the Midwest, and they've always had their bottoms probed. So it's almost slightly strange. But Carl Sagan, who is my hero, I adored the man. He thought yes. But then Brian Cox, the scientist, the astrophysicist, not the star of Succession,
Yeah.
he's not sure.
Right.
He's not sure anymore. He says that the odds are so overwhelming for us to be alive, human beings to be alive, and he's not sure. But it surely in the vastness of the universe, it must be true. But then why do they always go to the Midwest and put things up people's bottoms?
Well, why
they should go somewhere. Come and see me and Caitlin. Come and see us.
Why they?
Hang on, this all makes sense.
on.
If they are from Studio 54, it is just they're just like party aliens.
Well, they're never wearing clothes.
No,
Which is weird. Not
Again,
even
very
hats.
disco.
Yeah, that is weird.
very disco.
When they are wearing clothes, they all wear the same clothes, like some kind of cult.